all seen a lot of films about exorcism and possession, but this was kind of a different approach from the standpoint of it was the protagonist is a female character, and there's a school for exorcism, and those felt like some really interesting, fresh approaches to a genre and a storyline that's been told before. But I really gravitated toward the idea of this central female character who had a real emotional attachment, and via some trauma earlier in her life, sort of came to this and had some natural skill based on something she went through as a child.
You're my favorite person here.
The thing that drew me to the script when I first read it was there's a lullaby that is very much a part of the story itself.
Well, us girls, we gotta stick together in this place.
It's noted in the script throughout, and so that was an exciting part of the approach to the music for the film. So even before they started shooting, I wrote a simple lullaby, which became the theme of the whole film, and then recorded that on a music box and sent that down to the set, and so it was actually used on the set, partly for mood music, and then there are a couple moments throughout the film where there are actually some of the actors are whistling that tune. So it was a really nice way to see something that's actually a part of the story become a part of the score, and vice versa.
There's that beautiful theme that Nate did that carries through, and it's interesting. I think, you know, Daniel wanted music that on some level was going to be quite classic, I think, and provide that beautiful theme that carries through the film. But on top of that, you know, he wanted it to have a freshness and feel contemporary. And so I think what Nathan did is he struck that balance perfectly. You know, the music in the film, I think, is really beautiful, and I think we probably ended up with more music than we thought we would just because it was so beautiful and gave such gravitas and weight to so many of the scenes and the sequences.
Let's descend into the mouth of hell, shall we?
Sometimes when you're scoring a film, you want very specific themes for all the characters. And I think in this one, we realized early on that the lullaby was not only the lullaby, it was also Sister Anne's theme. So that really became central to the whole film. She's our protagonist, and so that theme really became the core for most of the moments of the film. And then I would develop it or approach it harmonically slightly differently to give it a fresh feel in a particular moment. And then the school had a theme, and that was about it. That musical material got us through the film in the way that we needed to get through it.
Cardinal Matthews is calling for you.
There are a lot of tropes that we've come to know in music as far as the horror genre. And so I liked the idea of something very melodic and very thematic driving the story forward, which is not always the case in horror films. And then the pipe organ behind me is something I try and use a lot. And then the choral element seemed like a good idea just because we're dealing with a school of exorcism and the church. And so that was maybe a little on the nose, but it was still really fit the notion of that school well. One of the things I love about being a composer and thinking about music the way I do is that there are so many unusual musical instruments in and around the world that people maybe don't have experience with. And so I've, over the past 20 years, gone out and looked for instruments that are really unique to become part of my sound, this being the biggest one of them. This instrument behind me was used in The Sound of Music, Day the Earth Stood Still, countless films. Jerry Goldsmith used it a million times. So it was really exciting to me to give it life here in my studio. Pretty much every project I try and sneak it in somewhere. One of the mixers on the dub stage was mixing in the score and said, "What is that bass sound you have?" Because I just noticed the whole room and our sub starting to rumble, and it was the pipe organ. And so just like being able to take something as derivative as like a low bass tone, but give it a completely different feel through the breathiness of these big 16-foot pipes is really exciting. Another instrument I used is called a stoutophone. It's named after a famous organ restorer named Ed Stout. It's an old pump pipe organ, and we gutted it and put it in a special wind machine that we can then affix any pipes. I have junk organ pipes that I affix to it. And then you can literally play a pipe and bend the pipe or change the tuning of the pipe live. It's kind of like a synth. It's like a very organic acoustic synth. Daniel Stamm and I worked together on a film called The Last Exorcism. We had a great experience working together. This came up, schedules aligned, and so we decided to work together again. Daniel is super collaborative director. He makes what he believes is the right hire, and then he lets you do your thing, and then he gets involved and sort of directs. There are some directors who are a little bit more controlling as far as what they want, and Daniel's great because he's really excited to see what you come up with very little direction, and then he starts to help sort of shape the whole thing into something. He's just open to the idea of doing something different and unique and giving you this creative space to do that.
Most glorious Prince of the heavenly armies, Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle against the rulers of darkness in this world.
I've worked with Nathan on 2 films, and in scary movies, it's very difficult to balance scary music with the emotional side of the score that's necessary for a movie that has some emotional textures. Go too far, and now you got sort of a scene that feels cheesy. Not enough, and it's kind of like, meh. And Nate has a great way of finding that balance, finding the emotional heart of a cue that's needed for an important part of the movie that's emotional, and having it resonate in a way that feels true and honest. But then we need to get to the scary stuff, and he's just as great at that as well. He knows how to turn on the octane and send the thrills and chills into the audience through his great scary textures.
It's the baptismal well.
Tom is a really wonderful picture editor, and he really knows music, and he really understands music as a tool of the editor to help tell the story. And he's a wonderfully rhythmic editor. I think the best editors, oftentimes you could set a metronome up at the beginning of a scene and just watch cuts coming on the beat here and there. And that makes a composer's life so much easier. So I always think like I can tell the quality of the picture editor based on how easily music lays into a scene. I think that this film in post-production over the pandemic was a really interesting set of challenges and definitely affected this film in the sense that Daniel was in Germany a lot of the time. I was here, so we were sort of bouncing cues back and forth that way. And I always love like the in-person collaboration when that can happen, and that was obviously nixed from the process because of COVID. It's also hard to get, especially during the height of the pandemic, to get a lot of musicians in a room together. So we had to get a bit creative as far as how we still got the sound of the score that we wanted, despite the fact we couldn't put an orchestra in a room. So what I ended up doing was just leaning more heavily into recording some of the instruments I have, like the pipe organ and others, and really letting that drive the score forward. That really helped. This was kind of a cool way to sort of lean into some of the more eclectic stuff and do it here with a very limited staff. And that was a super exciting approach to it.